Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise to speak to this bill, and there's quite a number of things in it, but I want to focus on just a couple of them. And the first one I'm going to address is the First Home Super Saver Scheme, which was introduced in 2017. What we've found is that it needs to be improved because the way it's operating now can be really clunky and can have some really unintended consequences for people who are using this as a way of saving for a deposit within their superannuation, putting in additional funds specifically with the idea of it being able to be used for their first home. And of course people can put funds into this either through salary sacrifice or personal voluntary super contributions. But what we've found since we've come to government that the legislation underpinning the First Home Super Saver Scheme is inflexible and can occasionally result in, well, a very poor user experience, including some people who have made an error in their application, finding that their savings are locked in superannuation until retirement, which was not what they'd intended, but just because of the way the inflexibility of the scheme, and we don't want that to happen. We want to fix that problem that exists. So this Schedule 4 of the Treasury Laws Amendment Bill that we're speaking to here provides greater flexibility for first home buyers using the scheme to amend or revoke their applications to correct errors and to help ensure their savings are released. These changes will increase the discretion of the Commissioner of Taxation to amend and revoke applications and will allow individuals to undo any errors that they have unintentionally made. This, to me, is the sort of thing that we do when we come to government. We look at how things are working and we take the time to address the issues that might be making it less user-friendly than it needs to be. So I'm very pleased to be supporting, Deputy Speaker, that Schedule 4 of the bill. Of the other three schedules, I want to focus on Schedule 2, and this one is in relation to financial advice. Now, across this parliament, we're all at different stages of our financial journeys. Many of us have kids at a different stage and older parents at a different part of it. But I don't think any of us would doubt how important financial advice is at all the different places in your life. And I think that as demographics change, we're certainly going to see needs in different areas. But there is a real challenge, and what Schedule 2 of this bill does is amends the Corporations Act so that we can deliver on our election commitment to better recognise the experience of existing financial advisors who have been at risk of being forced to leave the advice space. And at a time where we know people do need to reach out, it is really important that experienced, reputable people are able to maintain their providing financial advice. What this bill will also do is address some of the limitations in the current framework for new entrants. And I think it's probably worthwhile thinking about how we got to where we are and what the problem we have faced is. And that really goes back to prior to the Royal Commission. People have probably not got it at the top of their mind that ahead of the Hayne Royal Commission into the banking and financial sector, the Rudd government outlawed commissions and introduced legislation requiring advisors to place the client's interests above their own. And of course, after winning government, the coalition tried to undo those changes, although they eventually listened to our calls for a banking royal commission. And out of that, we heard some quite extraordinary things. One of the things we heard in April 2018 was from the corporate regulator, ASIC, and they revealed that 90% of financial advisors who provided advice to self-managed super funds failed to comply with the best interests of their clients test. They did some investigation and some research, and that was the conclusion they came to. Now, that is an extraordinarily high number, and that was one of the things that the Royal Commission focused on. as it shifted to looking at the financial advice industry. It essentially heard quite a long list of things that were not working the way that we would expect them to be working. Things like inappropriate advice, misconduct, including falsifying documents, multiple cases of consumers paying ongoing fees yet failing to receive regular advice reviews. There had prior to that been quite a big blowout in the numbers of financial advisors, from around 18,000 in late 2009 to, at that point, 2018, around 25,000, an increase of 41%. And yet just 8,700 of those financial advisors had completed a degree at a bachelor level or above. So these were the sorts of things that we heard during the Royal Commission, and that led to a bunch of recommendations being made. And one of those recommendations related to the need for people providing advice to have a strong academic basis and high professional standards. I note one of the comments that was made by Peter Kell, the Deputy Chair of ASIC at the time. He questioned whether you could even call the financial advice sector a profession because he didn't feel that sufficient people had reached a standard. So that's where we were. And that's what led to the recommendation about the need for high levels of education for people to call before they could be call themselves financial advisors. But of course, there are many financial advisors who are working, who, because of the experience that they have, are providing highly ethical, very well-informed financial advice. And the last thing we want to see is those people not able to deliver a service that their clients are very, very happy with. Since 2019, we have had about 10,000 financial advisors leave the industry. And that includes experienced advisors with no history of misconduct. And what that has done is reduce the access to quality financial advice. So we recognise that experienced advisors make a valuable contribution to the financial advice space. And I have spoken to many in my electorate in the Hawkesbury and Blue Mountains, senior qualified people based on the experience that they've had, but they don't necessarily have a piece of paper from an institution to demonstrate that. What they do have is strong client base who really regard their expertise with high regard. And we believe that those sorts of financial advisors play an integral role supervising new entrants during their professional year and sharing their knowledge and experience more broadly. So we have taken the position that, as we took to the election, that there are a whole group of people who should be allowed to keep practising. The current requirements do not properly balance that desire to professionalise the industry with the benefits of retaining an experienced, skilled workforce. So I'm very pleased that with this Schedule 4 in this piece of legislation, those advisors will be able to continue to work. So what the amendments do is allow experienced advisors with at least 10 years of experience and a clean record who have passed the exam to remain in the industry without needing to complete additional education be able to do that. The amendments will also facilitate entry into the industry for new entrants. The bill ensures consumers continue to have access to quality advice by removing a significant disincentive for experienced advisors to stay in the industry. And they do ensure that there's a pool of advisors to mentor, supervise and upskill those newer entrants. What's really important to us is the assurance that consumers have that they will receive quality advice. And the assurance is that because those experienced advisors who are affected by the amendments must have a clean record and they must pass the financial advisor exam. Together, the amendments that are contained in Schedule 2 ensure that consumers have access to good quality financial advice from experienced advisors. We're really conscious that timely passage of the legislation will give experienced advisors certainty as to their future in the industry, and I do recognise that they have been waiting to see how our commitment that we took to the election would be implemented, and I thank them for hanging in there. We know some have left. We know some have chosen not to wait and have brought forward retirements. But to those who've stayed, we do value very much the advice that you give, and more than ever, we know that people really, really need to be able to access that advice. If the legislation does not pass, or there is some delay in the passage, and we really hope there's not, these advisors will need to complete up to 8 tertiary-level units before the 1st of January 2026 in order to keep providing financial advice. And that's why it was important for this legislation to be brought before this sitting period so that we can deliver on that commitment. Deputy Speaker, I want to finish by encouraging people to seek advice. I'm very fortunate to have lots of young people around me who are moving through into their 30s and thinking about homes and what they might be able to do. And they often admit to me that they don't necessarily have a skills base for making those decisions. And I think we need to be able to reassure young people that there are quality advisors they can speak with. And I should also point out there's also the improvements to the First Home Super Saver scheme, which might also provide an avenue, and I'd really urge them to get advice so that they know what is the most appropriate thing for them to do. It's the same with the older people in my community. Just because you've stopped working doesn't mean that you need to stop thinking about what the financial situation you're in is. And I know that I get great feedback from people who head to Centrelink and speak to the Centrelink financial guidance people there to be able to look at their situation. So whichever way you do it, my real call to action to people is to seek that advice. It's not the sort of thing that any of us really love doing, but it can really make a difference, and we hope and we know that these changes we're making will actually improve the systems that we have in place and allow really experienced advisors to keep on giving that advice.